Hello everyone, I'm Rainbow Rat, and today I have a React video planned. I forgot to put that away. Is that Samantha Lux? I can't tell. I think it is. I have a React video planned today. This is a video uploaded by Jubilee, I believe within the last week, I don't remember exactly, called Should Minors Transition, Detransition versus Trans. It's one of their middle ground videos. I haven't reacted to any of these before on here, but I've seen other people react to them, and they have a tendency to pick people who are either very much on like the worst. I'm not saying that they do this every time because I haven't watched all their videos, and I'm not saying they're doing this time because I have not seen this video yet, but they have a tendency to pick people who either have very radical views on both sides or people who have like very middle views who like aren't or like people who don't represent the best, like obviously the trans community and whatever, and the detransition community and all these communities. There's a lot of like diversity within these communities, so obviously they're like 4 people that they pick for each side can't represent everyone in the community. But I've seen a lot of videos where the people they pick just don't seem to reflect the opinions or views of anyone I really know, either online or IRL. So I figured I'd add my voice to the cacophony of people who probably either agree or disagree with this video. 'Cause why not? That's what I'm here to do. So I also want to preface this by saying that I am a trans mass person. I have been taking testosterone for 2 years, but I did not start it until after I turned 18, and I never went on any hormone blockers or anything. So before I turned 18, the only transitioning I did as a minor was social transition. I used a different name, I presented differently, that sort of thing. I did not have any physical or medical transition before I turned 18. That's just the way it worked out for me. I kind of wish I did have the chance to take hormone blockers so that I would have less like chest dysphoria and some things would be easier. I had a really tough time with periods when I was a teen because I also have PCOS, and that caused a lot of issues with my menstrual cycle and stuff, and a lot of pain that I went through that I probably could have avoided if I had taken hormone blockers and avoided going through the female puberty. But I mean, it didn't happen, and what did happen happened, so I can only speculate on what would have happened if I had medically transitioned at a younger age, because I didn't get to go through that. So, let's just start the video. I've talked for long enough.
Raise your hand if you
I
feel
didn't plug my
attacked.
headphones in. Fuck. 1 second. I should have known that I accidentally hit start on the video before I recorded.
Raise your hand if you feel attacked by the opposite side.
So that is Samantha Lux. Okay, I watch her videos a lot. I love her. I'm interested in the person with gecko. Oh, the person with gecko is detransitioned. That's interesting.
Step forward if you agree with the prompt.
Okay.
Gender-related treatment should be banned for minors.
Okay, before they step forward, I'm going to give my opinion on this. I do not think it should be banned. The only treatment that minors get usually is hormone blockers, and once they reach the age of 16, or I've only heard it of after the age of 16, it usually doesn't happen before then, they might be allowed to do hormone therapy, which by the time they reach the age of 16, most of their peers have already started or finished their own puberties, or at least are in the process of their own puberties. And by that point in time, I believe most people would have a decent enough grasp of what is good, what they want to happen to them, and what they want to happen to them, what the medicine will do. I know when I started testosterone, I went through a informed consent clinic, so I didn't need to get like different therapists to agree with this. The doctor and the nurse, I had to go over the like list of effects of testosterone like 5 different times, and I had to agree to it every time, and we went through like all of them. So they explained greatly to me. They asked me if I had any questions about any of them. They explained to me extremely well how some effects don't affect people. Some of the things can affect some people more than others, and how you can't pick and choose which effects you get. So I'd agree, like, okay, I could start balding, but I could also grow facial hair, which I did, and I haven't started balding yet, because most of the men in my family do not go bald. Most of the men in my family that I know who are older, up in their years, have not gone bald, so I knew that for me, genetically, going bald wasn't as much of an issue in the cards. I know that a lot of people, the men in my family, grew beards and stuff, so I knew that that was probably going to come easier for me than for some people, because I've only been on for 2 years, and I think, well, I can't get my beard to grow on my face as much. I do think that I've gotten a pretty decent beard in the amount of time that since it started growing. It's that kind of thing. There's a lot of things that are developed by your genetics as well as the hormone levels, but my doctor explained all of this to me. And I believe that at 16 years old, someone is able to understand whether or not they want to go through with these. I think maybe at 16 they should talk to a therapist first before going through this far. But there's no 16-year-olds who are just suddenly like, I want to do this because I said so and you can't stop me. And also, surgeries very, very rarely happen to minors under 18, and as such, I believe only, like, when you're 17, possibly 16, but I haven't heard of that personally from any stories that I know of, that I can think of off the top of my head. I've not heard of any person getting any transition-related surgeries at 16, possibly 17, 18, they're already an adult, so at that point. And I believe it's the same as that. If they're going that far, I believe that they've probably been talking to a therapist, that they understand the consequences of these actions. I mean, at 16 years old, you can go and get your license and start driving, which can be deadly if you're not careful with it. There's a lot of other things you can do. And also, at this point in time, you have, I think it's at like 13 years old, you have medical consent for yourself. Like, you can consent medically for yourself. It might be different in different areas. I know when I turned 13, I had, like, my parents couldn't access any of my medical records or anything, and I was the one that had to consent to things. They didn't have as much say anymore. And I believe, and that happens with things like abortions or different, like, birth control and things like that. So I believe that it should be the same for gender-related treatment, that it should be between the doctor and the person who's getting the treatment to decide on, not lawmakers or anything like that. Wow, this is going to be a long video. I'm only 25 seconds in and I've been talking for 8 minutes. But let's see. I'm assuming that some of the detransition people are going to be the ones to step forward, and possibly a few of the transitioned people, because, like I said, we all have different beliefs. We're all different people. But let's see.
I repeat, gender-related treatment.
Okay, most of the detransitioners, I believe. I'm surprised none of the transition people step forward.
Medical transition is no place for a child.
I
I transition as an adult, and I have medical complications. I have mental health issues. Child cannot consent to a medical transition because kids want to eat ice cream every day.
But they don't suddenly
that
want to become a different gender.
I kind of agree with you on that as well, because we have so many rules and regulations when it comes to tobacco or alcohol or any type of drugs. Driving a car, you can't even rent a motel until you're like 25. There's some specific things that we need to put into place that I think would help protect our children, because the minors themselves really don't know who they are until they become 25, 26 years old. Their minds aren't fully developed, and it's
Also,
just,
that was a
it
fake,
kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
Also, I just want to interject here. The thing about brains not being fully developed until 25 or 26 is actually not true the way that it is often said like that. The study found that brains continue changing throughout your whole life. They're extremely malleable. That is just the way that the human brain works. The study, I don't remember the exact science behind it, but it found that your brain is more malleable while you're younger, and it's at around 25, it starts to become less malleable, but it still changes as you grow older. And it was like a specific part of the brain, I believe, that I was talking about. But it still is developed by the time you're like younger. It's just that it's still like going through that and gaining like experience and such until around the age of 25. And you don't see them trying to change anything else to the age of 25. Based on this fact, no one's trying to change the voting age to 25 or trying to change the driving age to 25 or the age for drinking or tobacco, I mean. No one's trying to change those ages to 25 because of this study, so why should we be changing something like this to 25? He didn't say that we needed to change this to 25, but it's kind of implied in this argument that they're like, oh, people shouldn't be pursuing this until they're around this age. I knew who I wanted to be and that I wanted this future for myself. Whenever I was 13, I've been waiting for this to be like this, to have my voice like this and have this beard since I was 13. It's been 7 years in the making, and I am happier than I have ever been. And I wish that when I was 13, I had the courage to ask my parents to take me to a doctor and try to receive hormone blockers, because at age 13, that's what I would have been able to get. By the age of 13, I was already pretty well into puberty, but it could have stopped some of the changes from continuing, and it could have given me a chance to pause and wait until I was like 16 to start this, and I could have been so much further along in my transition now. I'm not angry that that's not how the way that life happened, but I think that for people who know that who they want to be and know that they want to follow this path, that it should be an option for them to be able to do that.
So I did transition as a minor. I was a teenager who had a lot of mental health issues and had been sexually exploited and hated my body. And it ended with me kind of finding spaces where that was twisted into, no, you're just a boy in the wrong body. And it ended with me having my first ever medical intervention being a double mastectomy at 16, before any hormones, before anything else. And because of transitioning at such a young age, in the past 6 months, I have watched my body fall apart and waste away in front of me. I have constant joint pain. I've watched my muscle mass waste away. I've watched my vocal cords hurt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to carry a child. The evidence we have suggests that the best way to figure out if gender dysphoria persists into adulthood is to let them grow up. Because a lot of these kids will grow out of it, and many of them will just grow up and end up being gay or gender nonconforming.
Yep.
I do want to say that the studies that have pursued this to see if kids who say that they are trans continue, the amount of people who, I believe it's the amount of people who didn't continue to be trans was very small. I know that the amount of detransitioners in the community is like less than 1%. And of those, most people detransition because they don't have a support system. They don't have anyone to support them, and they find it easier to go back and live in the closet and pretend that nothing happened and get their like family and their friends and their community support back, pretending to be this person that they aren't, than to continue transitioning and possibly be homeless, not able to get a job, all these other bad things that can come with transition. That is the main reason that most people detransition. Obviously, there are going to be some people who go into this, and like, I feel for her. I wish that she had been able to get the help she needed before she had medical intervention. I do believe that minors who want to transition should have to talk to therapists, and like, actually, I don't think they should be able to just, I think they should have a mental health help. I'm really bad at explaining things. I think they should see a therapist. Like, I saw a therapist when I was younger, and he agreed with me that I was trans whenever I came out to him and talked to him about it. And that was about the same time when I was figuring everything out. As I was figuring it out myself, I discussed it with him because I knew our conversations were private, and I knew that I was safe to talk to him about this because I had previously talked to him about being lesbian. He did question me on some things just to keep up and make sure that he didn't think that I was being like forced into this or like that it was because of some trauma or something. But he helped me Like, he made sure that this was actually something that was from inside me and not just from an outside source pushing me this way. I do agree that I think minors should talk to a therapist before they go through with medical intervention. But I don't think that means that it should be banned for all minors, because it will be good for a lot of them, and it will be life-saving for a lot of them. A lot of trans people can't wait until they're 18 to start their transition journey. And there's a lot of things, the thing about let them grow up, there's a lot of things that will happen to them permanently with going through the puberty that they don't want to go through, that can be avoided by putting them on hormone blockers, which are completely reversible. If they do end up deciding that they're only gay or gender nonconforming, they can go off of the puberty blockers and just experience normal puberty at a later date. That's how it works for kids with precocious puberty, which is why hormone blockers became a thing. Precocious puberty is when puberty presents in a child who is much younger than the regular age of puberty, and they tend to be treated with hormone blockers until they're of an age where they naturally usually go through puberty. That's the whole reason hormone blockers even exist, is for these children. They're completely reversible, and there's been no ill effects found for however many years they've been used. I don't know off the top of my head. Hello, cat. Hello. Don't eat me. But I don't think banning it for children or for minors is the way to go about it. I don't think that the government should have a say in the medical care of trans kids, when it should be between them and their therapists or mental health advisors and their doctors. And usually their parents, but some parents are just transphobes. So, I mean, if they're staying under the parent's roof, I'm sure the parent has a say in what's happening to their child. You're not going to see, because there's a lot of issues that could come up with them getting kicked out and such if they're going behind their parents' backs. But that's why I also agree that there should be support systems in case that happens, because you have to face it, some parents are going to say that their children should transition because it came out of nowhere when they just weren't looking for the signs, and they didn't listen to their children when they tried to tell them what was happening with them. I don't even remember where I started. Let's get back to the video.
Can the disagreeers step forward?
Yes. I want to hear their arguments too and see.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, every major medical organization supports gender-affirming care for trans youth. They say it's safe and it's life-saving. And there are numerous studies that back that up.
The study that backs it up for puberty blockers is the Dutch protocol, and the same scientists...
I have 10 studies that I can bring to you right now.
The same scientists that brought that up have since rolled it back and said it was never supposed to be applied the way it has. The American medical industry, we all know, is money hungry and has gone off the rails.
I do agree that there are definitely some doctors out there that may be taking advantage of trans people, and I'm sorry that you went through this. Truly, I really am sorry. But trans kids are valid, and it's not a decision that they're making.
Right.
It's healthcare.
I want to speak to that real quick. Like, I came out 13 years ago when I was 14, and I knew, not that I was trans, but that I was a boy. I had to go through a lengthy process of therapy and seeing an endocrinologist and like go through different tests and exams to make sure that this was real to everyone else involved. Transitioning and being trans was just a process I went through to become who I always knew I was. It wasn't a like decision that I made. It was a life or death thing for me. And if I hadn't gotten on hormones and gotten surgery at 16, I don't know if I would be here.
As a father, I have 4 kids, and also as a trans person, I think that knowing what it looked like for me as a child, and that experience of going through all of the turmoil and all of the trepidation around my gender identity, I would not put my children in that situation. And also, I don't think that surgeries should be allowed for minors. Like, when we look at the data and we look at the statistics and we look at the research, the vast majority of these surgeries are happening to adults. They're not minors. Yeah. So let's start there, right? And then further than that, if we look at puberty blockers are reversible. So when it comes to children, when we talk about puberty blockers, that gives them a shot.
Yeah.
And it gives them autonomy over their bodies. It gives them a space that they can explore their expression. They can explore who they are without surgeries, without all of these other things that could have permanent effects. My kids were maybe 8 and 10 when I started my transition. And so I talked to them in kid terms. I told my son, I said, look, you know, your mom, dad wants to be a dad because that's how I feel. And my kids being so young, they understood it. They were like, okay, we're with it, you know? And so as they got older, I would bring them into my world and get them to understand the things that maybe I was going through. But now that they're adults, they understand differences in people, not just trans people, but people in general.
So there is such thing as gender fluid. How
Yes.
do you know that this kid is not going to change their gender expression later on? We really actually don't have studies on children that are taken over long term, like over 10 years, 20 years. You've only been on testosterone 14 years. One of the oldest trans men, Buck Angel, he almost died from testosterone. You're saying right now it saved your life, you may still die from it. You don't know. You're
die
still
happy.
Exactly.
I would rather die happy on testosterone than live unhappily. See, the thing is that I wouldn't live unhappily. I just wouldn't be alive. And that's one of the things you have to think about there. Also the thing about I don't know. Cut this. I don't remember what I was saying.
You'll die for ideology, and a lot of people have died for an ideology.
It's not an
But
ideology.
we have
It's
one
an ideology. It's an
idea
not
that you were
allowed
born
to
in the wrong
express
body.
themselves. Look at the suicide rate of trans masculine folks. It is at 55%. And one of the factors that could save their lives is support. Right? And so if we have folks that are committing suicide because they're not allowed to transition, how do we fix that? If you're telling me the transition for children or minors is something that shouldn't be done.
I am very sensitive to this subject, as I've been the person who has had to talk people off the ledge when it comes to suicidality. The discussion around how we talk about suicide is a very dangerous one in this community. You know, my parents were told, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? That's not an appropriate way to talk about that.
And I understand that, but it is our trans masculine youth
I understand
that
that
are at the highest risk
I
of
understand that,
suicide.
and they deserve help. But we also need to have a responsible conversation that is not using suicide as a means to push them down a pipeline before they have that comprehensive care.
So I've
Okay, I do agree that suicide is a large issue in the trans community, but I do think that we should be able to have arguments without always bringing it into the conversation. I don't think the suicidality of our community should be used as like a weapon in any argument of this, but it is an important thing to keep in mind when having these discussions. Like, obviously it's terrible to say, do you want a dead daughter or a living son? But in some cases that is true. And sometimes people who are having a difficult time accepting that their children or their loved one is trans need that, like, slap in the face to understand what's going on, to understand what we're dealing with and what their options are. Sometimes that slap in the face is needed, but I do think it should be used slightly less than it is. But I don't think it should be taken completely out of the conversation, because it is a very important thing to keep in mind when talking about these things.
have a question.
Sorry, Aris, I know you've been wanting to say something.
Yeah, no, because I have a big problem. Oh, yeah, no, sorry, I'm not an interrupter. What I'm going to say is we insult children or youth so much by taking away their autonomy and their own agency over their own decisions and insulting that they know who they are. Like, an adult knows who they are more than they do. No one knows who I am more than I do.
Right.
And it's always been that way. I've always known who I was. I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I just had to adjust my body. And so I think taking away kids' agency and the right to their own body is, it's anti-human.
I agree very much with her that is true. It's a whole problem with society in general, not just with trans issues, that they try to take away rights. Like, children don't have any rights. And this is a whole different topic that I'm not going to get into right now, but we need to teach children that they have autonomy, and we need to let them have autonomy. Obviously, you're not going to let a 2-year-old go get a tattoo because they want it, but there are levels of autonomy that children do have and that they are in charge of. And like, there is not any difference between someone who is 17 and 18 besides like one day. Like, there's not that much of a difference that it should be completely banned for someone who's 17 to medically transition at all. No hormone blockers, no HRT, no surgery or anything. But at 18, they can go and do all of that, sign up for a reward, all that stuff. There's not really anything different between that. So it's the kind of a dumb line to draw to take away autonomy from everyone under 18 in this regard and give it to everyone as soon as that day passes.
Question, do you believe minors should be able to get tattoos or plastic surgery? Or
they can get plastic surgery. They can get plastic surgery with the consent of an adult. I need to look this one up because I know that it's pretty young. Minimum age for nose job in girls is between 15 and 16 and 16 and 17, usually, because you can't have it until your nose has finished growing. Let's see just plastic surgery in general. Most surgeons require the patient to be at least 16 years of age, or 18 if they're male, because that's fucked up. I don't see why that would be different. But yeah, the thing is that they can get plastic surgery, including cosmetic procedures, at a young age. And on one hand, I think plastic surgery, specifically the cosmetic ones that are done just because people want them to, I believe that it is a very predatory industry, and I believe that it preys on the ideal that everyone needs to be this perfect person, this perfect shape, perfect everything, that they need to be this exactly what society wants them to be, and they prey on that. But the thing that society wants changes all the time, like with when the Jenners or the Kardashians or whatever got big and everyone wanted their big butts and stuff like that. Like, it changes all the time, so you can't just go with... Yeah, but I think that whole industry is predatory, but I would be hypocritical if I said that they can't get that and also, but that they should be allowed to transition. I'd be hypocritical. But also, people who get plastic surgery don't have, the issue, the mental issues that trans people have, which is an argument against plastic surgery and for trans people being able to transition younger than people getting cosmetic plastic surgery. But also, as I was saying, with the autonomy of children, it's a whole... I'm forming this in my mind. I think that cosmetic plastic surgery should only be allowed for minors like 16, 17, if they also have to go through the hoops that trans people have to go through therapy and through talking about this with their surgeons, all this stuff. That's the only way I think that it should be allowed for young people. It doesn't seem like they need to have therapy or anything, or discuss this with a therapist before they're allowed to discuss it with a surgeon and go in for a cosmetic surgery like a nose job or anything like that. But anyway, back to the video. Wow.
Sent to the list about
I
understand they are different things, but to what level do we to what level do we give children bodily autonomy over everything they do? Because here's the thing, children need barriers in childhood development. You need barriers, and they need a safe way to push against those barriers. And I worry with the current medical system that instead of giving them a safe way to express themselves and push against barriers, we have taken some of those barriers away. And that is why you see more detransitioners, because those barriers have been lifted.
Yeah, they're not just doling out surgeries for children. That's not happening
I had a letter from a therapist in a single visit at the gender clinic office
and
before I had
abuse
the first.
from that therapist who did not psychoanalyze the rest of your
not
issues.
right, and that shouldn't
because
have
your issues weren't being trans. There were a lot of other issues that you're
I have a
addressing
diagnosis
right now.
of gender dysphoria as
And
well.
you shouldn't. You were misdiagnosed.
No, I have one.
Right.
Yeah, you had to get a second opinion, honey.
Right.
And how was
Can
how was I supposed to do that when my parents were told
That's
that I
not
would
your
kill
fault.
myself?
But your
Yeah, that's not your
parents,
fault.
your parents,
Their biggest crime in all this was trusting a medical system that they thought would help me, and the professionals apparently not doing the right thing
I
here.
understand, but your
Yeah,
parents were
absolutely
responsible for the decisions that were made on your behalf.
I think that what this really highlights is the importance of you sharing your story, because what it shows is that you can't jump into these transitions, and you
Yeah.
shouldn't listen to these doctors that push you to transition
And
just
nobody
because you're feeling a
should.
certain way.
Social media brainwashes
They really had to like cut out of that because that was getting heated there. Yeah. See, the thing is, I do think minors should get therapy before they jump into transitions, and I don't think you should listen to doctors who specifically start pushing you to. I think doctors should follow the patient's prerogative or whatever. That if the patient starts asking about different types of transition and this kind of stuff, the patient should be the one to push this along, and the doctor should follow and help with what they need. The doctor should not be the one pushing the patient to transition in any way medically that the patient is not ready for themselves. I do agree that that minors should get therapy before they transition, but I also think that you have to be careful about how many barriers you put up between a person and transitioning, because often a person will know they're trans long before they start going for medical transition, and having to affirm again and again to different doctors that they are trans can really deteriorate a person's mental health. Okay, let's go. What's that? Social media.
teens to believe that they're trans.
Social media brainwashes teens to believe that they're trans. I disagree, because it is still... I mostly disagree. Social media is terrible on all teens. There are so many pipelines and different ways and different like echo chambers that teens can find themselves in. You can see this with teenage boys who go start playing one video game, and then they end up in a Discord server with different people who play this video game, and then those Discord people have them join another server that ends up being some like alt-right pipeline, and they are incel kind of thing, and then they just keep going down the alt-right pipeline and end up doing things that I shouldn't say here that are very bad and end up with a lot of people hurt. But this can also have this can also happen in the other direction, that social media can, I don't think it brainwashes, but there can be, depending on which social media you end up on, this kind of push of like, hey, there's a lot of these people who are like large creators are kind of queer or trans, and I want to act like that. It doesn't happen nearly as much. I've seen a lot of people who, the main social media I use is Tumblr. So that tells you a little bit about my experience with social media. Tumblr is a very queer space. And I definitely went into periods of time where I was like, oh, there's this mo-gay stuff and the neo-genders, neo-pronouns, that kind of stuff. Well, I say that stuff. I don't dislike any of that stuff. It's just the mo-gay. Mo-gay is really just another acronym for LGBT, but there was a whole discourse about that I don't want to get into. I still like the acronym more than trying to figure out exactly which LGBT acronym to use, which is why I generally just say queer, because it is the academically approved word to discuss our issues. Yeah, but I don't think it brainwashes anyone to believe that they're trans. There are some people who might pretend to be trans online for clout, but it doesn't give much clout. Like, I'm obviously out as trans on Tumblr, and I didn't get like this huge influx of followers for it, for any of my posts just talking about any sort of gender or sexuality kind of stuff. There's not there's not a push for people to be that. People who are cis or just not out as trans are also like getting clout for whatever they do and are still being followed for being that. No one has gone to when I was still saying that I was a cis lesbian, no one went to my replies and was like, hey, be trans. Hey, you have a short lesbian haircut, you should be a guy. No one on Tumblr even mentioned the fact that I could be trans on any of my posts until I started talking about being trans. So... Sorry, I have very dry lips. So, I don't think that social media is... Because it's also still very much a niche kind of thing, and very much a thing that I got bullied for in school. And I don't really use social media that most of my classmates used. Like, I don't have an Instagram or a Twitter or... Those the big ones. I have Snapchat, but I don't talk to many people on there. I know that I've gotten bullied on there for posting things during Pride Month, like trans things, about how, like, stupid and dumb things are. I don't think social media is brainwashing teens, actually, to believe that they're trans. I think it's brainwashing teens to believe that they have to hit these, like, high standards for their body and such. I believe it's brainwashing teens to go down this alt-right pipeline, or that, like, women are inferior, all these, like, sexist kind of things, but I don't think it's brainwashing teens to believe that they're trans, because the trans community is very much like, oh, if you are trans, here's some things we can do to support you, and if you're not trans, here's other things that can also support you. We support you any way you are, we just want you to be you, and we want you to be able to be you if being trans is what you are. But let's see what these people say. I'm sure that at least 3 of the detransitioners are going to step forward. I don't think any of the transitioners are actually going to stand forward, actually. I like all of them so far. And I believe that they have very similar ideas to me. I knew that she was.
I have to agree on that one. Like, there's this thing about it.
I was...
Right.
Oh, all 4 of them, okay.
Yeah.
The one in white was the only one I wasn't sure.
Play that they have.
The one in white was the only one I wasn't sure was going to step forward. I am a little surprised at the one transitioner stepping forward, but I want to hear what they have to say.
I don't think...
Because I can see an argument for it being, like... It's kind of ambiguous. There's the chance that it can, because social media just influences everything it does. And children are very influenced by social media, but I haven't seen a pipeline of people being pushed to be trans by social media, so that's why I said no. But I can see arguments for it, so I want to hear what they have to say.
Think that it necessarily brainwashes children, but I think there are a lot of people who get into being queer or trans because it's trendy, and I know that's a really controversial statement to make as a trans person, but I have seen it, I have experienced it, and I also find that social media, especially apps like TikTok, give a lot of these kids so much misinformation and lead to people thinking they're trans.
I agree with the first part of this on how it does seem more trendy, but I don't really think that's true. It can't possibly... I guess it depends on which circles you're on in line. I guess I can see it being considered trendy in my circles because most of the people I interact with are queer in some regard because we build community around ourselves. But I want to see what he's talking about with the misinformation. Leading people to think they're trans. I guess I could see I possibly have an idea of what he's talking about, but I want to see more. But I do agree with him that it's not necessarily brainwashing, but it can seem a little more trendy, but I think this just leads to people actually reflecting on their inner self, and if they come to the conclusion that they're still cis and still straight, great for them, and if they're not, hey, they might not have figured it out without us, or at least it might have taken a much longer time for them to figure it out without us. And I don't think there's an issue with being there to help people start to discover themselves.
When there are much deeper issues, and everyone just wants to belong and find an identity, especially when they're young. You know?
I think brainwash is such a strong word
that's a very
to
aggressive
use
word.
there
I
when
would
it's...
not. That's why I hesitated to step forward.
And that's why I would step in and actually say it's more so of like a social contagion.
Yeah.
But what did it say about social contagion?
And that's why I
yeah.
would step in and actually say it's more so of like,
Okay, move out of the way, thank you. Social contagion is the spread of emotions or behaviors from one individual to another, sometimes without awareness. I don't think it's a social contagion. Stay.
a social contagion.
Just, yeah.
What got me to transition in the first place was social media. It had a grasp on me that there could be something else out in the world for me during that discovery. And I played it to the fullest 100%. I even passed as a female for a good, what was it, 6 years out of the 7 that I was transitioned. And later down the road, I went and paid out of pocket and talked to just a regular therapist, and she made me start questioning my own existence in a way, what I can do as a human being, not just as a male or a female, but what can I contribute to the society. And it made me open up to maybe I was born as a male, and it feels empowering to me.
Yeah, I mean, I was heavy on social media. Like in my transition, Tumblr, that was the place to be
Okay,
for
don't call
sure.
me out.
And everyone was talking about their transition from my experience, and everyone was talking about a lot of mental health issues, depression, and all of that. And it was kind of being trendy in that sense. Like when TikTok came out, like that was like a whole nother world. And the biggest
don't
thing
use
that I
TikTok
found
much
with that is
either.
like they weren't seeing a lot of the negative things that were happening in their transition. There was always like a positive outlook on it, like I'm being who I need to be, like this is
This
great.
is the ticket to your happiness.
Yeah, and
that's how it's sold.
like so much on social media. Like I made a documentary on my transition, and I really went into depth of like a lot of my depression that I dealt with on that, and I didn't find anyone talking about that.
Jen, I personally didn't think I was trans till I saw earlier trans YouTubers. Before I was just gender bending man. And for sure, I also feel like comparing yourself on social media to other people that are more beautiful and successful will create dysphoria of some kind. And some people,
it will affect your self-image for sure.
Because we see all those beautiful trans women that are all dolled up or had every possible plastic surgeries they could ever get. You're gonna feel dysphoria. You're gonna be like, I don't look like that.
And
so
that's
I
in
have to go
general,
through
though.
steps.
You know what I mean? Whether
Yeah.
you're cis
Right.
or trans, everyone
So
is
social media
is
has
dealing
such
with
a-
that
I've
fallen
for
into
sure.
that.
It has
looking
such
at,
a bad impact on
actors
mental
and stuff. I
health.
wanted to be that muscular dude, and I wanted to do
100%.
that. So
No.
yeah,
It is such a
does
bad,
exist.
like well-documented
for
bad
everyone.
impact on people's like sense
Right.
of self and mental health, and so
But I also really quickly just want to say, like, I don't want people to think that, like, social media is turning people trans.
Yeah, we agree with that.
All
Okay.
right, can the disagree step forward?
I'm glad that they all agree that it's not turning people trans.
Yeah, okay, so my thoughts on social media and everyone suddenly looking or being trans. I think whoever is leaning towards that or looking towards being trans for answers was always someone that felt that way or felt some type of way about their gender or their identity or the way they present themselves. They're just gonna go that way. I know plenty of femme twinks who went the muscle queen pipeline. It's not a rare occurrence. And so just experience your life, have fun. Try not to take social media seriously because no one is advertising their failures. It's all fake.
Yeah, but I think it is also important to say that like social media is very, very effective. You know, I mean, I personally scroll on TikTok and I'm like, do I have OCD? Do I have autism? Like all these different things. And like it can suck you in. So it's important to be aware of those things.
I have a question for Samantha, since you have the largest platform here. Do you believe over the years you've inspired people to transition?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that I've inspired people to believe that it's okay to be transgender, it's okay to express themselves, and that it's possible to live a happy and successful life.
How do you feel about the fact that some of them are going to regret the body modifications they got and going to have
I
like...
think that they should go to a doctor that is well versed in gender care and have the appropriate psychoanalytic analysis done beforehand. That's not my
And
problem.
I feel like a lot of folks are going to social media looking for possibility models.
Train.
They're looking to see if they're okay. I know for me, when I was very young, looking to see if there were other people like me, because for a long time I thought that I was
The only one.
Exactly.
I thought I was the
right.
only one,
And
yeah.
so feeling like that, like suicide was a thing for me.
Me too.
Right. And so when I did see a possibility model, when I did see somebody that looked like me, that put me in a space where I was like, I'm okay.
sigh of relief.
Right.
I agree very much with these people that watching trans YouTubers as a young trans person, like I watched queer and gay and trans people on YouTube. Excuse me. So rude. before I started questioning my own gender. But when I started questioning my own gender, and I had these trans people that I already looked up to, like, I don't remember exactly who I was watching at this point in time, but I know that I love watching, like, Jamie Dodger and Sam Collins, Samantha Lux, Brennan Beckwith I watched a bit of. I can't remember many more off the top of my head. Oh, No Offense. Not as much back then, but now I love his videos. Watching these people, it made me understand that, like, I am okay. It is okay for me to be this way, and there is a future for me if I continue down this route. It's not going to be, like, all this terrible, evil, bad stuff that's going to happen to me. There's a great chance that I won't regret this. There is a chance. There is just a chance of happiness and self-fulfillment if I continue down this route. And that's all that I needed to know. That's what I needed to know before letting myself exist in this way. And this also happened with, like, smaller creators on Tumblr and such that I would follow. But it definitely helps. I don't think it hurts as much as it helps. Not nearly as much.
I will say there's also a difference from, like, showing people that you can have a positive life and then telling them what to do. So I think you on your channel are kind of like, hey, look what I was able to do and how this made me feel, versus, like, you should do this because I did this.
Yes.
So
And I'm also, I try my best to be very upfront
Right.
about the
Because
issues
we
of
can't help if
transitioning.
someone's
Exactly.
going to change their mind on something. Like, that's inevitable.
Yeah.
We're humans.
And I have to jump
Yeah.
on one more thing with that. Like, if I'm watching her channel and it inspires me to transition, I have been watching white straight men be president for years, and I've not wanted to be president once. So I don't identify with that.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about brainwashing. Let's talk about where we see things every single day happening a certain way versus someone just living their life authentically.
People with gender dysphoria need therapy, not surgery.
I think people with gender dysphoria need both, really. I'm curious whether these people are which definition of gender dysphoria these people are going to go with, whether it's the medical definition or the definition that the trans community has used in the past, that is just any disconnect between their internal gender and their external sex, or the medical definition, which is an extreme discomfort caused by the incongruence between your internal gender and your external sex or external body. Because if it's the first one that I said, the one where it's just any disconnect between your gender and your sex, I don't think that therapy is necessary. I believe they should talk to a therapist, possibly. But, I mean, I don't think it should be necessary. And I don't think that because that is just something intrinsic inside of you, there's nothing, like, extremely mentally debilitating about that. And I think if you want surgery, you should be able to talk to a doctor and stuff and get to surgery. I don't think it should be held back from you. If it's the latter option, the one with the extreme discomfort caused by this disconnect of gender and sex, I believe that they do need therapy and probably surgery. And I think they should get both. Because even after surgery, it can manifest itself in other ways because it is a further mental issue. Like, I know most of my physical dysphoria is I've kind of gotten rid of, both by being on T, but, like, that didn't do anything to my chest, and I still have much less chest dysphoria than I did before T because of the way my body is developing. So I don't know how surgery could affect someone who has a much greater amount of dysphoria. So I think I'm going to listen to this section, and then I will cut this video and do a second part, because this is going on much longer than I thought it would. So let's see.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that one.
I've been convinced.
Okay,
We all agree.
everyone agrees that they need
It's
both.
potentially both, though.
Yeah.
I think everyone with gender dysphoria needs to go through a therapeutic process
Yeah.
and mental health care before they make that choice for themselves.
Exactly.
I personally confused a lot of my gender dysphoria for body dysmorphia because no matter how much I feminize my body, till today I still don't feel comfortable in my own body. And now, like, looking among like members of trans community, I see that people keep on getting more and more surgeries. The surgeries are no longer affirming. You can just tell that this person is like struggling with body images. I was able to get on estrogen pretty quickly when I was 22, and my mental health declined afterwards, and I attributed it to being still in the wrong body, needing more body modification, end up getting sex reassignment surgery. I do believe that transition was sold to me as a hardware fix for my mental issues that were not addressed. I still struggle with internalized homophobia that pushed me into transition in the first place. I struggle with borderline personality disorder, body dysmorphia. I'm on a spectrum, and I'm ADHD, and I have all those issues that were not helped, and I was still struggling with them after transition, and I still do. Overall, after a few years, I came to a conclusion that I was not in the wrong body, that I'm a gender non-conforming man, and I am a feminine man. That's what I am.
I don't know if you guys have heard, but I've had a lot of binary trans people say that it's not a mental health issue. Like, if you're trans, and I know I don't agree with that. Like, I think there's a disconnect between the mind and the body. I guess I'm asking that. Like, it's like, do you think that it's a mental health disorder? And
I don't
needs to
think
have
being
therapy?
transgender is a mental health
disorder.
I think, you know, gender incongruence is what they're referring to it as now. It's listed as a sexual health concern, but the gender dysphoria, which is the symptom that arises when you are transgender, is a mental health concern.
So maybe I'm thinking of, like, that's what I'm trying to say then in a sense.
And then once you are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and I feel like this is kind of what the prompt is kind of hinting at, if you do have gender dysphoria, the only treatment for that is transition. Whether that be just a social transition, a medical transition, whatever transition fits you, that is the only way to heal your gender dysphoria. When I transitioned, the first thing my mom said to me was, "Can't you just be gay?" It hurt hearing that, but a big reason that she said that was she was afraid of what my dad would think. He's always been very, very conservative, very traditional, you could say. He would make comments about trans people, about gay people growing up, so I always knew that he wasn't necessarily accepting. So when it came down to me transitioning, I said to him, I'm going to do this. Either you're going to be the dad that accepts me and supports me through it, or like, goodbye. And he chose to support me, and we're closer than ever now.
And I think a lot of us go through medical transitions to easier go through social transition.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. And so a lot of our folks that do transition and may detransition, both experiences are valid, but also understanding that we're not mentally ill because we're trans, right? And I think that there should be a psychiatrist or someone within behavioral health to be able to say, okay, you're in the right frame of mind to make this decision. But I want to just make it very clear that trans people are not dealing with mental health because they're trans.
Absolutely.
I disagree. I feel like transgender is definitely, and elderly trans people afford for it to be classified as mental illness, so it's covered by insurance. Otherwise, why are you getting the surgeries to?
Because
if it's not a medical condition.
The dysphoria is a medical condition.
It is, but
It's
it's in
a
your
medical
head.
condition
I would
without
say
being a
that
mental
you have some kind
illness.
of mental disorder if you're trying
right.
to mimic a stereotype of opposite sex. to
Okay, but
pass
It's
in
not a
society.
mimic, it's
The treatment for
aligning.
this mental illness is to transition.
I have a question though, because I have a gender dysphoria diagnosis, I always have. But I'm still where I am today.
Can I give you my honest opinion? I think that you were probably misdiagnosed.
I
and
don't
that-
think I was.
So you,
Do you
do
feel
have gender
dysphoria
dysphoria?
in your body?
I certainly do now.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Well, because of the
you
change
want
that you made.
want to talk about now, but at the time
At the time, did you?
I genuinely believed I did. I thought it would save me. And then looking back, I realized that my dysphoria stemmed from some severe trauma that was not handled.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why I think that mental health step is so important.
Yeah,
Because I've heard this from several other, mostly female detransitioners who we had some form of pretty bad trauma that spawned gender dysphoria symptoms.
Yeah.
And we can disagree about misdiagnosis or something later, but it felt real at the time for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it did. I didn't mean that.
And
in a-
no,
in a
I know.
malicious way.
And it's one of those things where that's where the mental health treatment really needs to come in and get to the root of that issue, because oftentimes, specifically with the detransitioners I've talked to, that was ignored. I came out to my parents in a mental health facility after telling the therapist that I thought I was transgender. And she told me we had to tell your parents so that way you can get the help you need. It led to me seeing a gender therapist who, honestly, the issues I was facing.
I definitely think there's an issue with that mental health professional immediately forcing her to come out to her parents and saying that that's the only way to get the help you need. I don't think any professional should force you to come out to anyone in your life, including your parents. And I believe that they should always follow the patient's they should always follow what the patient wants to do. If the patient is not ready to come out and physically transition, medically transition, you do not push the patient to do so, because they may not need that to be happy in their own life. They may decide that the possible health effects of transitioning are not worth what the benefits would be for them. That is a personal issue for every trans person, and I don't think any doctor should force you towards transitioning medically or force you to come out before you're ready to.
Facing were never addressed. To this day, no one ever addressed the fact that I had severe trauma and exploitation going on as a young teenager. Instead, I was kind of just affirmed in, you believe this, and instead of even just a little pushback, it led me to the point where the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy at 16. A few months after that, I started testosterone because it was the next step of what I was supposed to do.
God.
Okay, first of all, I'm not doing any more of this video right now because I've been recording for an hour and I need to get a drink. And I will do a second part of this. I wasn't planning to, but I will. Like I said, I don't think any health professional should be pushing the patient to do anything regarding medical transition or coming out. When I was a freshman, this was probably about 6 or so months, maybe a little bit more, maybe 8 months after I started questioning my own gender. There was an English assignment where we had to write an I am poem describing something about ourselves, and we had to write a personal essay about something we struggle with. We were warned by the teacher that if we did anything too bad, that we were gonna be sent to the counselor's office, because she's had to send people to the counselor's office before for talking about things like depression and stuff like that. And I should have known, but I wrote both of them about being trans, even though I was very much a baby trans person at the time and only out to a few friends, because it was the end of the year and I thought, I'm never gonna see this English teacher again, because she only did English for the freshmen and it was a different hallway from the rest of the school. There was a shoot-off hallway where the freshman only classes were. So I was like, I'm never gonna see this lady again. After a few weeks, I can just write this and get my truth out there. And I got sent to the guidance counselor's office. And she did ask me if I thought I would be safe if I came out at home. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not ready to yet. And she said to me, I believe that in my experience, if you're ready to come out at school, you're ready to come out at home. So I'm going to call your parents and tell them that that they need to talk to you about this. And I'm like, I don't want you to do that. But she did. And so I got home from school that day, and my mom said, the guidance counselor called me and said that you're having body image issues. Do you want to talk about it? And I said no, because I wasn't ready to come out yet. And my mom did not push any further, which is a debatable move on her part, because body image issues is very much a wide range of things it could have been, because this was also about the time that I was getting over an eating disorder. That's a whole different can of worms. I still love my mother. She did what was best at the time, I believe, because of how it ended up. But I'm very glad that she didn't push any further, because I wasn't ready, and my guidance counselor should not have pushed it like that when I said I wasn't ready. She should not have forced that on me. And the doctors that this girl went through with her transition should not have pushed her the way they did. They should have made sure that that's what she wanted and that she was the one pushing for these things. But I still don't think that is, I still think, it's not a mental illness. I do think that it should be, gender dysphoria should be a medical diagnosis that you're able to get, so that transitioning can be covered by insurance, because the American healthcare system is fucked. but it is not a mental. There's the gender incongruence that they were talking about, which I believe all transgender people have, is that incongruence. And I think that that should be able to be diagnosed to get transition covered by insurance, whatever transition you need. But I think gender dysphoria as a separate diagnosis does need therapy and does need, because it can stem from trauma and things like that. But that does not mean that it always does, and in fact, very rarely does it end up going that far if it is trauma-based. She just had a very unlucky experience with some really shitty psychiatrists, and I'm so bad. I feel terrible that she had to go through that, but that does not mean that you should go and try to ban it for other people or try to put in these extra hoops that already she didn't go through the hoops that she was needed to because the doctors that she went through were bad at their job. I don't think we should be adding more hoops and making it harder for people who do need these transitions just because a few people fell through and ended up going not where they needed to be. But that is all I'm going to say in this video, because I've been recording for over an hour. I am going to break this up into a second part and do the second half of this video next week. Holy crap, my battery's on 15%. I need to stop. I hope you enjoyed this video and enjoyed me running my smart mouth. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!